surrounding yourself with the right people is more important than surrounding yourself with more deals if it's at the cost of, picking the wrong partners.
Welcome to The Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. Each week, we investigate themes of leadership, entrepreneurship, and mindset with some of the greatest minds in real estate. And now, the data scientist of real estate, George Roberts.
Well, welcome back, entrepreneurs. Today we have the pleasure of interviewing Tom Brichetti. Tom is the founder of Beartooth Ventures, and he also has a very interesting background because he was an entrepreneur before he moved into real estate. He's got his own marketing firm, started out working with various startups, and now has pivoted a little bit towards helping out on the marketing front with some real estate companies. So with that, I'd like to bring Tom on and welcome you onto the show. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks a lot for having me, George.
All right, awesome. Well, it's good to have you. I think you've got a pretty cool story here, and maybe I'll just dive right into it. I think one of the coolest things about your story is that you've had the opportunity to get into very large syndications without putting in any of your own money. So why don't you tell us how that came about, and maybe you can help some of our listeners that may be in the same position, maybe thinking, I want to get into these big syndications, but I don't have a lot of money. How do I do it?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of a few things. One, being opportunistic, two, putting myself out there, and then three, just taking advantage of the opportunity. But I was consulting, doing my own thing, working with different startups, helping them with different business development related efforts, more on the sales and marketing side, completely unrelated to real estate. But I had been reading and listening and watching YouTubes and just trying to learn as much as I can about real estate investing, and started putting myself out there and trying to find potential investors to just help them do what they were doing, and along the way learn how to get into real estate deals. So I met the right guy at the right time who had amassed a real estate portfolio of around 200 doors and was leveling up into larger properties, because those 200 doors were mostly smaller multis, and started bird dogging, hunting for opportunities. And we worked together for about 6 months, and I was doing whatever I could to help grow his engine, his real estate engine. And about 6 months into our relationship, got under contract with a 270 unit deal, $16 million deal. And at that point, we had kind of grown from, he was my client in a way, to being more like partners. And this is a longer story, but I had already left New York City to be a nomad, and this was in the middle of COVID, and I got just into nature, and my plan was to go down to Latin America. But instead of doing that, I picked up my bags and moved to St. Louis to get in on that first deal. So I didn't put any of my money into that deal, but I did put a lot of sweat equity and physically relocated to St. Louis in order to get in that deal. I would not have been able to any other way. Learned a ton, still learned a ton, very active operator on that deal, and another one that we closed last year, almost exactly 1 year ago. But like I said, kind of combination of right place, right time. But I've been putting myself out there and looking for the right person or small group to help with their efforts, and met the right guy. And then 6 months later was in on that really large deal. It's pretty crazy for that to be really my first deal. Usually people take a while to work up to that, but
Right. I love the way that you found freedom through real estate. Excellent story. And I gather that so you never did go down to Latin America. You didn't have the opportunity to fully enjoy the life of the nomad, but I gather that you're pretty hungry to grow, looking for new partners, ready to move on to further big deals, correct?
Yeah. So actually I did fulfill that dream. Closed the first one December 21. Closed the second one October 22, exactly a year ago. And right about then, I headed down to Mexico and spent a lot of time there. Then was in South America for about the first 6 months of this year. I'm back in New York right now. I just got back to New York a couple months ago, but I did fulfill the Latin American nomad life journey for mostly the cold months up here. Warm months down there was not an accident. Right. And so, yeah, in fact, the second deal, which is in Arkansas, I was in Mexico City when that deal closed. So that was pretty cool. That kind of proved the ability to invest remotely, but if you do that, it's all about the right team. I'm not doing this alone, and I'm not the boots on the ground role for these deals. I was physically present on the first deal because I had to be just to get involved, but that's one of my partners that's the more local guy. So yeah, I was in Mexico for that second deal, so that was pretty cool.
Well, and those are great choices too, because if you do like the concept of slow travel, going places where it's not terribly expensive, where you can kind of set down the roots a little bit, learn about the culture. Mexico, I know you can stay there 180 days, no visa, perfect place to spend 6 months, but you've got to see a whole lot more than that. Well, I love the story of the first one because you really focused on operations. And I think that's something that a lot of people are not focused enough on. I see a lot of people for the last few years, deals were easy to come by, and it was all about just closing the deal. How do we find the deal? How do we finance the deal? And then I would say in many ways, deals used to run themselves because the market was rising and rising tide lifts all boats. But now that operations skill, that ability, having that in the backpack, I think that's really huge. So why don't you tell us more about what that means to you and how you can offer that to another team?
Yeah, I mean, with these large deals, right? So between the two deals, there's 410 units and four different assets, three on one of them, and the other one is just one property. There's just so much going on. The business plans are robust. There's a tremendous amount of CapEx work we're doing between the two deals, a little over 2 million in total CapEx budget, which isn't actually a ton compared to some larger lifts. These are the types
But
of deals.
considering the number of units, that's not a whole lot. What are we talking per unit?
I have to do the math. I mean, 2 million divided by 410 units is just under $5,000 a unit. So it's not, these
Yeah,
are not
these are
heavy
not
lifts.
extensive renovations. We're talking
No,
about adding a little polish.
totally. I mean, a lot of unit turns, but the
Yeah.
type of renovations that you want, lipstick, cosmetic stuff. Both deals were long time mom and pop owners. Both deals were pretty much cash flowed from day one, which is again what you want. But yeah, I mean, in terms of what the operational duties, I mean, the list is long. I'm very good at project management and making sure momentum is kept up. A lot of that is managing the property managers. We have third-party property management on site, but the thing is that the lens that they look through when they run the property is a very different lens than we look through. They're all about making sure bodies are in units, but they don't really care how expensive it gets to put them in units, as long as it doesn't get too expensive to get them fired, right? That's basically their threshold. As long as they can keep you happy enough to not fire them, which is a huge undertaking to switch property managers. Nobody wants to do that. So as long as they don't get fired, then they still get their 3 to 5% of top line revenue.
It can be like that. Sad to say.
Yeah, and the thing is if any of our property managers are watching, I like them all as people, but it's a different lens, right? So as an asset manager, you really have to manage the books. You got to keep a keen eye on every last GL code and really go through the fine-tooth comb. It's something that I do monthly or more. I mean, a monthly I do a deeper dive once the books are locked in from the previous month, but pretty much weekly. I mean, not literally daily, but there will be weeks where multiple times a week I'm kind of combing through and keeping an eye on the numbers to see what stands out, looking for trends, looking for outliers. Recently, here's an example. This is actually a really good example. So with a newer deal, one of our business plan initiatives was to initiate a RUBS program on electric, and among other things, but right now let's just talk about electric. So it doesn't sound too complicated, right? Electric company bills us, and then we bill back the tenants, prorated based on the number of people in the unit, and there's a whole formula and whatever. But I started noticing that the electric really wasn't going up enough. There wasn't enough RUBS happening. Started digging in, and I noticed then that there was a tremendous increase in electric expense in the last 2 months, like very out of whack with the previous months. I started looking into it. And what it turns out is that the electric company actually screwed up, and they weren't billing us for all of our meters. So then they realized this and billed us for like a year of 2 of our meters. We have like, I don't know how many meters we have, a dozen or something, but 2 of them, they didn't bill for a year. So we missed it because we were paying electric, but we weren't paying all of it. And those 2 meters accounted for a lot. Like it was like $20,000 worth or $30,000 worth of electric costs. So the output of that is, since we weren't being billed it, we weren't rubbing back our tenants. So
Right.
our roads program was suffering because we weren't being billed by the electric company. It's their fault. They made a mistake. Their invoicing system.
Right. And then you sign those leases and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, but in
Yes,
reality,
I mean,
what ended up
immediately.
happening, we spent a year, we paid a year's worth of electric costs in August in the last quarter, but we're not really able to rub back a full year against our tenants because it's not a little bit each month. So
Right.
that's an example of like, I guess in theory, it could have been caught earlier, but that would be hard to catch. How are you supposed to know you're not getting billed for 30% of your electric bill when you're getting the electric bill? It's hard to.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So now we implemented a new system where our property manager, every month we get billed, or they get the bill, they do an audit and they make sure they're billing for every meter, so that even if the electric company screws up again, we'll say, hey, send us that invoice so that we can be paying on a monthly basis, and then carry through those costs, send through those costs to our tenants for the ROSE program. So that's an example of the granular detail you got to pay attention to really execute the business plan.
Sure. And I love the example of using utilities, because I've got a similar situation where we're billed per unit for water. And so I called the city and said, hey, we're going through lease up here. We're trying to improve the place, trying to improve your community. You're killing us. But can you bill us on a smaller number of units through the lease up? And they were willing to do that. So I would say you got to keep a close eye on the utilities, and don't be afraid to ask some questions.
Totally. At the end of the day, everybody you work with, everybody's human, and everybody's trying to get their own work done and close deals and, make money and do all those things. So sometimes the best thing to do is just pick up the phone and call somebody, and usually they're pretty friendly and they can help you work through, a problem that you're working on.
Yeah, I love that. And I know this just really dovetails. I ask everybody their strengths. And I want to say that you said it was operations, logistics, analytical abilities, and personableness. Any of those you want to call out?
I mean, I don't know. I guess it's sometimes it's a little awkward to talk about your own strengths, but I like to get along with people as much as possible, and I think that comes in handy on these big deals. It comes in handy in every aspect of your life, but these big deals, there's so many people involved. There's the property managers, there's legal, there's accountants, there's your partners, there's investors, right? And a lot of my role is kind of being the glue and making sure all these different teams and entities are communicating well. I'm very big on communication, and I let my partners and colleagues know when I'm not happy with their communication, because problems happen, mistakes happen, people miss things. I miss things. I'm not perfect either. But if you communicate well, then it just makes everything so much easier. You make a mistake, it's an opportunity to actually win somebody over if you communicate well about it and you're proactive about it, instead of like waiting for them to find it and now they're annoyed at you. Instead, if it's like, hey, I made this mistake, here's how I'm fixing it, people really respect that. So I try to go out of my way to over communicate in my professional life and personal life.
Yeah, great story. And so great projects you've got there. What are you working on now? What's your pipeline look like? Where are you looking to expand?
Yeah, so right now I have kind of a two-pronged approach, looking down two paths. On the investing side, deal flow side, I'm really focused on hospitality, specifically boutique hotels, and or call them like short-term rental, community, or cluster, not like a single family house that could be an Airbnb, but more of like, maybe 15 cabins in the woods or a community of tiny homes, something like that. I'm based in New York, grew up in the Hudson Valley. I'm looking in the Catskills region, a couple hours from New York City. I was just up there a couple days ago, actually visiting a couple properties, and some good stuff in the works. So I'm excited about what's coming there. I'm also kind of going back to my roots of how I got into real estate and looking again now for a small team or partnership to help grow. So same way I got into real estate in the first place, although at that time I didn't know the difference between CapEx and cap rate. So now I've got a couple years, almost 3 years of experience, 2 large multifamily syndications, excellent underwriter operations on all these things, and looking to bring those skills to a team and really be an extension of their team as I continue my own, investing journey. So that's kind of my focus right now, those 2 paths.
Well, and then I always like to hear about the origin story behind the name. So Beartooth, is that like a hunting thing? Are you out bear hunting or what?
I'll tell you exactly what it is. The Beartooth Mountains are in Montana. It's on the
Oh,
border of
nice.
Montana and Wyoming. And I was driving across country a few years ago, and a friend recommended that I stop into the Beartooths, and they said they were just had this special energy about them. And I had a really special time. Actually met a friend. It's a longer story, but the 2 of us went into the mountains, spent a few days camping out there, saw more bald eagles than we saw people in the time we were there. And it was just a really special time. And that's the energy, that's the vibe that I want to live my life on, this life of freedom and openness. So when I was coming up with a name for, I need an email, I need a website, Beartooth just stood out. So Beartooth Ventures comes from that.
Love it. Yeah, nature is beautiful. It's cleansing, and glad that you have that in your life. I think it's probably the antidote to a lot of things that are going wrong with our society right now.
Seriously.
But wish I had more intelligent commentary on that, but we'll just leave it there and say, let's head into the rapid fire round. Tom, are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Tom, if you could be known for just one thing, what would that be?
Oh, starting pitcher on the New York Yankees, but I think that ship has sailed.
Okay, what's the greatest lesson in leadership you learned as an entrepreneur?
That it's people over deals. Surrounding yourself with the right people is more important than surrounding yourself with more deals if it's at the cost of, picking the wrong partners.
What personal characteristic has been most pivotal to your success?
I would say kind of my determination. I kind of have this like blind lack of fear, which sometimes I could maybe dial back a little bit, but I just when I set my mind on something, there's just nothing that's going to stop me from getting
I
there.
love that blind lack of fear. I feel like that's a very entrepreneurial traits. A lot of people on this show exhibit that traits. Let's shake it up a little bit. I've got some random question cards. Just tell me when to stop
Stop.
cutting the deck. Okay. Top card. What remains undone that you've wanted to get done for years?
For years? It's a good question. Well, I don't know. I've now been self-employed for going on 4 years, so I'm proud of that. But I feel like I'm still at the beginning edge of that journey. So I don't know. Right now, the focus is getting the next deal, getting the next deal going. So I have 4 years wanted to get into the world of hospitality. So that is the next step that I'm focused on.
Great, love hotels. Can you name a book that's helped to forge you as a leader and as an entrepreneur, and tell us why?
Um, I mean, specifically as a leader and entrepreneur, that's a good question. Obviously, there's the classics, Think and Grow Rich and Rich Dad Poor Dad. Obviously, those books I'm not the first one to quote those books. Those 2 come to mind as books that any entrepreneur or any real estate investor really should focus on learning. But honestly, I think without naming a specific book, I try to read a lot of books about meditation, mindfulness. Sometimes I read a book about Buddhism or, other kind of Eastern religions and methodologies. And collectively, those books and the lessons from, ancient teachers. And, you can learn a lot from those books, even if it's not like a book about real estate investing. Those sort of mindfulness related books have given me a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, I love the diverse reading interest. I think that's very valuable. Personal growth is huge. Now, can you name one tip or trick that investors can implement in their real estate business today?
One tip or trick. Honestly, let's see. I mean, there's a lot of different directions. I don't have like a hot tip, but networking, it's all about who you know. It's part of the reason we're talking right now, George, right? I put
That's
myself
right.
out
We
there.
were networking just last week,
Yep, I
or
put
was it
myself
early
out
this week? I forget.
all of the above. I put myself out there to a mutual connection of ours. He said, hey, you should really talk to George, and here we are on this podcast, and maybe somebody who listening to this podcast will reach out and I'll lead to a relationship with them. Like I
That's
said
what we're
before,
hoping.
it's people over deals, and an extension of that is, at the end of the day, we're in an interesting bubble, this bubble of real estate investors and entrepreneurs. And it's an interesting cast of characters, a lot of eccentrics, a lot of like anti-establishment people, a lot of like lone wolves. And it can be a little challenging sometimes to, get everybody work together, because we're all people that don't want to have a boss, and we're all people that want to be in control, kind of type A personalities. And at the end of the day, like when you pick your partners, I know for me at least, I really want to pick people that I could go spend a weekend away together with in the mountains, or go not just get a beer with, but really enjoy their presence, because you're basically marrying this person for 3, 5, 10 years. And it's just so important that, you really enjoy being friends. I think is important, because if that stuff, if those
Yeah.
relationships start to fray, the business related decisions and challenges become bigger and harder.
Yeah, I
So
like the friendship aspect there because I think that choosing the right personalities, knowing who you are, and getting the right group of people together is very important. But I'm also reminded that I think it was Rockefeller that said that it's better to have a friendship based on business than a business based on friendship.
that's a great quote. I did not know of that quote, but I was going to say something similar, that I don't mean you should only do business with your friends. I
Right.
just mean that your partners should be friendly, and you should be
Yes,
the type of,
absolutely.
your values should align. That's really the most important thing.
I knew that's what you were saying, but it was too good. I had to throw that in there.
Good. I'm
But I'm
glad you
glad
did. I
that you
like
mentioned about networking because that's exactly what I want to ask you. If we want to do that in a more explicit way, hopefully somebody does reach out to you or me or both through this podcast as a result of today. But is there anybody specific? I don't mean like a person, but sort of a business function that you're looking to get to know better, or you're hoping to reach out, you trying to look for example, say limited partners, or maybe you're looking for financial contacts. Is there anybody that you are particularly looking to meet out of today?
Great question. I mean, listen, the easy answers is limited partners, right? Everybody's always looking for
Right.
investors. I'm giving that as an answer, but that's not going to be my only answer, because that's too easy. Everybody can say that. Everybody's always looking for investors. Like I mentioned before, kind of my second prong right now, I am looking to join up with some good people, doing deals, active, maybe a small group, people that need some bandwidth support, looking to expand their team, but maybe not ready to, or not looking to hire somebody full time. That's not the type of role I'm looking for. But if you're a hard money lender and you've got a great pipeline, but you can't keep up with the demand, and you need an analyst to help you, underwrite more deals, that's something that I could slot in and really provide a lot of support in. Pretty you know, not that too steep of a learning curve, because I have a tremendous experience underwriting. So yeah, like I said, kind of putting myself out there like I did, got into this industry a few years ago, and just trying to do it again and surround myself with good people. And I think I can bring a lot to the table.
Right, awesome. Now, can you send us out with a quote to help forge our listeners as leaders and entrepreneurs? I know you had a great one a minute ago. I wish I could repeat it about you don't just do business with your friends, but it's important that you be friendly with the people that you do business with, something like that.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think another one, I don't know why this one just popped in, but how about this? You don't have to agree in order to accept. And in partnerships and relationships, business, personal, that can take you far, where it's okay if you don't agree with somebody, but it's really important to accept them for their feelings, for where they're coming from. That takes a lot of empathy. And I think empathy is a trait that some of the really, it's hard to be a great leader without a strong sense of empathy, because you just you have to work with people to get stuff done, especially on these big deals.
Absolutely. And I think that business partnerships are great. They really test the person. Surety, as you're mentioning, it tests your ability to grow, communicate. And like you said, it's like holding together a marriage for 3 or 5 or 10 years in a day and age where a lot of marriages don't even last 3 or 5 or 10 years. So very, very significant. Now, I want to make sure, though, that before we leave, that people know how to reach out to Tom Brichetti. So carrier pigeon, internet, smoke signals, what's the best way to get in touch with Tom?
Yeah, any of those ways work. I am also, as far as I'm aware, the only Tom Brichetti in the world. It's a unique
Okay.
last name. So if my name's on this episode, you can find me basically anywhere, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Or you can shoot me an email, tom@beartoothventures.com. I'm open for networking, so hit me up.
I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with our audience, Tom.
George, it's been really great. I appreciate you having me.